institutions of excellence to impart education, quality education. 10 million people is what I was told that the CMI is imparting education to. Phenomenal. I think the kinds of work that you have done in the last 5 or 6 decades, no words can express the gratitude that we as Indians, we as countrymen have for the work that you have done. We must give our deepest regard, and I can tell you from the Government of India, any sort of assistance and help that we can be of, we'll be more than happy to provide it. Because it is not possible for any government, not just my government, any government to be able to deliver all the needs and to be able to live up to all the aspirations of the people of India. So we've got to work together in a collaborative fashion. And I think institutions like these are certainly one that need all the support and help that we can give from the government's point of view. But friends, I just took this morning not to read out a speech about all the data points and how great our country is and what you have to do or you shouldn't do. I don't think young people in India today need to be sermonized as to what you should and shouldn't do. You all understand what needs to be done. You're adults who care as much as for yourself as you do for this country. And I think we are in safe hands as long as we are working with unity. We are working with a single-minded focus of realizing our dream, our potential. And let's not be blamed 20 years from now by the next generation that we had the opportunity and we couldn't deliver on it. I think that we have to avoid at all costs. And I can just promise you as a member of this parliament, as a member of the government, that despite what you see and all the noise you hear in all sorts of media in our country, we have a very robust democracy. Sometimes people say it's too noisy. It perhaps is at some level. And I see it from very close quarters. But I can tell you that as far as the government is concerned, there is absolutely no diversion from where we want to be. We have an agenda at hand. The Prime Minister and all of us are working to make sure that everything we do, whether it's reforms, whether it's investments, whether it's job creation, we do it keeping the best interest of the people of India, and more importantly, for the young people of India, because like I said earlier, you have the most years ahead of you. So we have to create an India that is suitable, desirable, livable, and appreciated by all of you. And that is a job at hand. And people like myself will be judged in time to come by history, by the amount of opportunity we are able to offer to you. Nobody needs any sympathy, nobody needs any help. Just need the platform to be able for you to display your skill sets and your potential. And we are working day and night to make sure that we're able to provide that ecosystem where you're able to take advantage of the platforms we create. I wish to thank all of you for listening to me and to all the other speakers this morning. And I hope you have a wonderful, interesting, joyful 2 days. And like I said, please talk to each other, share your experiences, and you'll go back much more enriched than you were this morning when you started this 2-day event. And I want to once again thank the management for giving me this opportunity to come here and speak with all of you. I pray to the Almighty that you all keep ever smiling and you and your families prosper, and may your path be blessed.
Sir, it's a very simple question. We've seen that our government is being ruled by very old age people when we have such a youth population in our country. So what inspired you to come into politics at a very young age like this?
People have been talking about my age, but I just want to let you know I'm not as young as all of you. I finished studying some time ago, and I was rather young when I entered Parliament, but I'm beginning to gray on the sides. So, the age is telling, and this job does make you age faster than you should. You see, mine is it's more circumstantial. Some of you know my father was in politics, but at that time I was studying for my master's program when he met with an accident. And post that, I came back to India and I started helping my family in the work that they were doing, and my mother, etc. But I decided to do this job in particular because I felt that from all that I've studied and learned, and I had the good fortune to travel, to many parts of this country, and I was able to learn a lot. And I thought whatever I've seen, experienced, it can be used best on this platform. I mean, I did work in the corporate sector for a few years before I joined politics, but in 2004, by then I had joined the Congress party, and the party asked me to contest the elections. I fought that election in 2004. So it was a very conscious decision about entering parliament and trying to do something for the district that I had been very closely associated with. So it was, and people keep talking about someone like me who belongs to a political family and some of my other colleagues who are in government, who are in parliament. The trouble is that there are these few of us, a few names that are often seen and repeated and talked about and printed about, and we keep, but there are hundreds of other people, my colleagues who are MLAs, who are members of parliament, who frankly don't belong to any political background, but have chosen to do this job at a very young age also. So I think it's a calling you have, and I always keep repeating this, that if you don't enjoy the job that you do, you really can't succeed. I mean, you can pass your time, you can be a mediocre person, but to be able to excel in something, you really got to like what you do. Why are scientists and researchers successful? Because for years on end, they keep on doing the same thing because they enjoy it. So if you don't enjoy what you do, very slim chances that you'll be successful. An idea for all of us is to be successful. And I think lucky people are able to know what their calling is in life and why they're here on this planet and what jobs they need to do to make them satisfied and happy. This is what I do, and I'm reasonably happy in what I'm doing.
Good morning, sir, and my question is this. What are the major problems which India is facing, the top 3 problems, and what is the solution from central government?
Okay, for me, the biggest problem that I see is that there is rising inequality. So there is a Gini coefficient which is indicative of how far the rich and the poor are. So while we have done tremendous progress, India is a $1.5 trillion economy. Numbers have grown, but the affluent classes or the richer people have got exceptionally richer. And the downtrodden or the rural communities or the tribal or the people who live in the fringes of our society, their development and empowerment has not been enough. So the divide between the rich and the poor, the divide between the haves and the have-not, for me personally, is the single biggest concern. You can't have a country where we have the highest number of billionaires in the Forbes 500 list, and we have 44% of our children below the age of 5 who are malnourished or undernourished. Huge disparities. For me, the biggest challenge we have as a country is to how do we reduce this gap. I don't think it's sustainable to have a system where you have this widening gap. It will create fault lines in our society that will cause irreparable damage. That's number one. Number two, of course, is issues of transparency, issues of corruption, issues of not being accountable and responsible for your actions. That's happening not just in public life. I must add, it is happening in all aspects of our society, whether it's business or private sector. This is something that you can't legislate for. While we are going to make the Lokpal bill, we will do all that we can from the government's point of view, but please understand, this has to be a social consciousness. It has to be something that we want to do. I don't think it's impossible. I think in time to come, as more people get aware and are driven towards making the system more accountable, we'll achieve that. And lastly, I think we also in India need to, maybe I shouldn't say this on a mic, but I believe we also are driven by a lot what is printed out or is aired through the media. We have mobile phones, we have internet, we have few hundred television channels, we have so many newspapers, and in Kerala, of course, you read so much more newspapers than anywhere else in the world. So our opinions get formed by what's printed in front of us or what's shown. There has to be some semblance of normalcy in it, and I think this sensationalization of issues and very important issues are trivialized, and trivial issues are made huge, gigantic issues. That sort of semblance, I think we've got to mature in the time to come to be able to have a tempered response and to be able to have an educated opinion about things. Sometimes that causes distractions, it causes people to lose focus, and then we're not able to do the work that we're supposed to be doing. I mean, we have many challenges. You asked me for a few. I just spoke about 2 or 3 that came on top of my head.
So do you actually think that a present government system provide a proper platform for fulfilling the dreams of young budding politicians?
So no democracy is perfect. First of all, democracies are of different shapes and sizes and color. There is democracy in Singapore, there's democracy in Russia, there's democracy in Egypt, and there's democracy in India. And if some of you will understand, there's a a different degree of how democratic each of these systems are. I think India, what we have been able to offer for this country, and not me, I'm talking about in the 50s, is actually the most inclusive democracy that the world has ever seen. You know, single franchise, every individual, equal rights, participation. Some of you may know, by the way, when you conduct the general elections in India, we have electronic voting machines, which the Americans have still not been able to figure out because they have those hanging chads and there's ballot papers and they go to court and they can't figure out. Our EVMs are perhaps the best machines that we have for conducting elections. But more importantly, the conduct of the elections in India, the Election Commission is an independent body, conducts those elections. The machinery involved in conducting those elections, Indian general elections is the largest planned human exercise on earth. 700 million people go and vote. Millions of people are deployed. All this happens over a period of few weeks. Transition of power, governments change hands. Now there's hardly any violence. There is no malpractice now because, you know, it's all recorded. There's CCTV cameras, there's EVM, there's technology is taken over. And to really come to the crux of your question, democracy has thrown up leaders of all types in this country. In the 50s and 60s, while we had very, very good people in parliament who were tremendous statesmen, you know, who made speeches like nobody else. They had traveled the world, they were barristers and lawyers with eminence and knowledge, and they were able to capture, you know, the global events and happenings on the floor of the House. 80s, 90s, you saw a different type of politician coming into parliament, perhaps less educated, more crass, not fluent in English, but were also getting elected from the same people. And they were perhaps more representative of the real India that we live in. And today, like I said, there are 40 parties in parliament. Any more representation will create more problems, you know. And I was talking to a colleague of mine, a senator in the US. He was talking about how the bills are stuck in the Congress and the Senate has not been able to pass. There is politics in Washington and Capitol Hill. I said, in America, you only have 2 parties and you can't work it out. We've got 40 parties and we are still able to run a government, still able to pass our bills and still able to make our budgets. So our system is not perfect, I have to admit. But I think it does give ample opportunities for anyone to be able to stand up, get his voice heard, his or her voice heard, and all sorts of regions, all sorts of political affiliated parties are taking action. Young people, I think, now are getting much more stakeholdership in our politics than ever before. And it's not tokenism. You see, one is to talk about youth policy and talk about young people. The real challenge is, as a political party, are you giving the young people the power to make policies? Are you giving them the leverage and the capacities to be able to formulate policies? You know, just symbolism or tokenism is perhaps not enough. But you will see now in the next few years a much greater role, much greater participation and true representation of young people who come from all parts of our country. And it has become inevitable because all political parties now understand that if they do not respond to the demands and the expectations of a young aspirational India, they will fall by the wayside. So that realization is there very much. And I think if I can say this, that the Congress party, my party, I think I have no hesitation in saying, has been one of those first few parties to understand the potent and the power and the strength that young people have, and has been able to give us the opportunities to come out and shape policies both for the party and for the government.